dare you ask me if I condemn an act of violence, an act of oppression, or an act which is illegal? You should offer me the same respect that I offer you. They asked the Muslim, do you condemn?
Oh, I saw this.
Right?
I saw this.
Do you condemn what happened to Salman Rushdie? Muslims should not have to. Just as I wouldn't go to a white person and say to him, do you condemn what Breivik did? Don't seem to call a white guy a terrorist, but only if he's brown and he's Muslim, then suddenly he's a terrorist. But if a white guy does it, it's for some other reasons. Yeah. So if an MP gets shot up north, we're not going to call it terrorist, we're going to call it mental illness. There have been dozens, if not hundreds, of 9/11s on the Muslim community from the Western world.
This is a very interesting point.
Right? You go to the Muslim world, they've been ravaged by wars and weaponry that have been supplied to both sides and perpetuating these wars and the fighting and the division that have been created. So we've had more 9/11s committed upon our societies than the 9/11 that happened in America. And I believe that there should be certain basic principles that should be established.
Agreed.
That they should be regarded as limits.
Agreed.
Set. And I said to you that if we set those limits, for example, with the Jewish community, I would say as a Muslim, why don't you offer me the same courtesy? Why don't you offer me the same protection?
That makes sense.
And I think it's reasonable, right?
That makes sense, except I would take those rights away from the Jewish community.
The other thing is this. I like what Voltaire said. A people who don't learn from history are condemned to repeat it.
Right.
And what we've seen throughout history, for example, what we're seeing in India today. In India today, there's now an environment that has been widely reported that is gearing up to a genocide of Muslims. The rhetoric, the politicians, the clergy, the people in the temples, for example, are openly on camera inciting hatred, division, and violence is increasing on a daily basis.
Well, then I condemn that incitement.
Right. And now the thing here is this, who decides what is incitement? Who decides whether this is going to have a good outcome or a bad outcome?
We have to.
Right.
We have to. So if we want to have that discussion, can we start by agreeing there's an optimum? I think in any choice, there's always an optimum choice. So there's an optimum level to draw the line on what constitutes freedom of speech. Yeah? We both want to aspire to what that thing is.
Yes.
Great.
So what we should do,
there, we're hunting
what
it.
we should do is come to some common understanding and say, look, if we're going to offer these rights to a group, it seems reasonable to offer it to other groups as well.
We should definitely have
right.
We have an ideal that
where
it should be equal
there's
for
equality.
Everyone. Right. Now you want to raise the level of censorship.
No.
You do. You just said you want to raise it so that there's no hypocrisy.
No.
And
look,
I thought you did.
No. What I'm saying is that when something is, and look, we're clever people generally speaking. Right. Generally, I'm talking about when we come to people who are involved in legislation and dealing with the law and what have you. There are clearly certain things that you might say or I might say, which are obviously, obviously fall within the realms of incitement and vulgarity and indecency.
Hang on. You mix two things. Incitement is very different from vulgarity.
I'm just saying that are grotesque in their nature, that are designed to be grotesque, that are designed to cause maximum pain, rather than having this intelligent discussion of differences of opinion.
Okay, but the way you just defined your terms, you mixed in apples and pears to me. You mixed incitement, which we agree is wrong, but then you mixed in vulgarity, which to me is fine.
Okay, let's look at incitement.
Incitement, we've agreed is wrong.
What is incitement?
Incitement to violence. If there's any incitement to violence, we agree that's
How can violence erupt from a discourse about a particular people by otherizing them? Making them seem like they're the enemy within, like they want to take over this country. They want to establish their laws upon us. You can see how that can incite violence, right?
Nobody is in denial of the slippery slope connectivity, as if you start bad-mouthing. Yeah, if you start bad-mouthing
indirectly,
groups,
but yes, it does.
It will have payback, no questions. But you said you're the realist. Okay. Realistically, what else do you expect? Okay. I have faith. It's interesting that I, the atheist, seem to have more faith that the human condition can face
because you're a secret believer, that's why.
Okay,
Tony.
well, by that logic, maybe
you're
not.
You're a closet believer,
according to your faith, you seem to be arguing pragmatism. What I like about religion, yours included, is we are supposed to aspire to the highest principle and what is the best that can be achieved. Not just what's good enough or what might get you by, you go for the best. And the best in this is we share what we feel, we argue it on its merits, we treat everybody equally. You're arguing that there's hypocrisy, and you're correct, because the Jewish community might be given special privileges, or another community might. I'm not trying to be anti-Jewish, I'm just using an example. I'm arguing lower the bar. I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy, okay? I'm a big fan of some very, very extreme stand-up comedy, because although it can be profoundly hurtful and insulting, I think in confronting those darknesses, particularly with laughter, in the open, it can be very healing and very enlightening. And there's often a lot of truth in going to those places where we feel hurt. And we're going to become very, very namby-pamby if every time our feelings feel a little bit offended or very offended, we start thinking we have the right to inflict our views and draw barriers for other people.
Okay, so look,
I don't think it's constructive.
We clearly disagree.
We do.
I would say that when you allow certain rhetoric in society, as the brother here has already agreed upon, I think you were nodding your head as well, there are certain things that are a slippery slope.
Definitely.
And that lead to subjugation and oppression of a people.
Yeah.
And I think personally that as I would hope rational beings and sensible beings, that we would at least try to curb that type of...
Definitely.
Right, okay.
But we disagree on the prescription as how it's best to do it.
So let's deal with the second part of our topic of discussion.
Oh, okay.
Which is that should Muslims condemn
that's not my
violence or terrorism? No, because that was our conversation.
It was, but my question was more specific. It was just to you personally. Okay?
Oh, I see. Okay.
I was asking you personally, as someone who's chosen Islam as your faith.
Yes.
If,
I condemn
as an outsider,
to...
if you thought that action was prescribed within Islam as you embrace
well, that's not the way you worded it, Tony. Sorry? It wasn't. That's not the way you worded it last time.
Sorry.
It was slightly different.
Okay,
now you're changing the... No. You're moving the goalpost.
Okay, hang on. Okay, that wasn't my intent to move the goalpost.
Okay.
When we had this conversation originally, we had it off camera.
Yes.
In a friendly way, and it still is friendly.
Of course.
Now I'm on camera, I'm being more self-aware, and I'm trying to pin down. So what I was aspiring to say, was... Because you've chosen a religion, it's your choice, and I think I'm allowed to inquire about your choices and mine.
Of course.
I'm asking if you believe that action
was representative of Islam.
Whether it was in line with the prescriptions of Islam as you understand.
And I don't mind that question.
Thank you. That's the question.
You know what? I don't mind that question. But what I do mind, though, is that when Brother Andalusi, he went on to a TV interview with Jeremy Kyle. And, there were a couple of other reporters there.
Is Jeremy Kyle the really inflammatory one?
But he does some supposed, talk shows or whatever he does, right? And there was, what's his name? Douglas Murray as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? They asked the Muslim, do you condemn...
Oh, I saw this.
Right?
I saw this.
Do you condemn what happened to Salman Rushdie?
Oh, right? Abbas, this is going to get...
My argument is...
I saw that.
My argument is Muslims should not have to. Just as I wouldn't go to a white person and say to him, do you condemn what Breivik did? Because you look Christian. You're white. Do you condemn what Breivik did in Norway? Because he's quite right to say to me, what the hell are you talking about?
No, I'm happy.
What's that got to do with me? What's that got to do with me?
I'm being honest. I'm happy if you want to ask me if a Caucasian Christian acts in a particular way, and I self-advertise as being a Caucasian Christian, which I sort of am, right? I'm happy if you want to ask me that question. I can handle it. My feelings can handle it. Okay?
I would never ask you that question out
Please
of...
do.
No. I'll tell you why, though.
Go on.
As I said to you previously, because I, within the Islamic tradition, have to think good of you as a pretext, as a foundation.
Let's say you heard on
So
the
as a
news.
foundation, I would think Tony's a good guy. And of course, he would not be advocating violent acts.
I would respond that I appreciate your politeness, but in all fairness, I actually don't need that much politeness from you. I'd prefer that you weren't quite so polite and we had a more open discourse. I'm happy to address the question. I think it's a reasonable question. I do think, look, if the Muslim community is feeling very oppressed or if it's being oppressed, that's wrong. If it's feeling oppressed, I'm very sorry. I'm trying to work out how no community feels that way to defuse the problem. I honestly believe that putting a lid on the bubbling cauldron just increases the pressure and it blows up. I know you think
Tony,
not, but I do, so we
Tony,
disagree.
first of all, you're not a minority in this country.
No, I'm not.
You're not being persecuted by the majority.
No.
You don't feel threatened by the majority. You're not misrepresented by the majority.
Agreed.
You're not ridiculed by the majority.
I get ridiculed.
You're not marginalised.
Not in that
You're not
way,
marginalised. You don't struggle to get jobs like the minority.
You haven't seen my job interview.
No, I'm just giving you an example.
I know.
Right? You don't have your kids at school being said that you're terrorists because you belong to this particular religion, but the Muslim community are. So when you ask that question, it has certain underpinnings.
I understand.
It means that I'm assuming that all Muslims agree, so they're guilty.
No,
can you please prove to me that you're innocent?
No, I'm sorry.
And I'll tell you why. Tony.
I disagree.
There's a very interesting book written by, I've mentioned it to you, Assistant Professor Todd Green.
Yeah.
It's called Presumed Guilty.
Yeah.
And it addresses this very same question. And it highlights how by asking this question, it already implants in people this notion that they all seem to agree with this, or they're going along with this, and they have to provide their innocence. They have to show their innocence towards this subject.
Yeah, it's the same thing Trump did when he accused Obama of not being an American citizen. Mud sticks. I understand. Nonetheless, I refer you back to my slippery slope argument. We have to grapple with this stuff. If you can just accept that, I'm going to have to.
But do you think it's appropriate to ask a Muslim? Do you condemn this?
I think it is entirely appropriate. I think the problem is how best to ask the question in a context where it's understood it's meant with good intent, and within the recent historical context, they're actually being provided with an opportunity to defuse the problem and to win me round, instead of seeing it as a negative and assuming that my motivation for asking it is presumptive. And for some people it will be, but with me it's not. If you can just look at it from the other person's point of view and go within the context of, dare I say it, for example, 9/11, recent history, and the fatwa which was issued from Iran, which is a nation state, which seemed a little bit official. It's not unreasonable for people to ask, by the way, can you tell me what your understanding of that creed is, seeing as you've embraced...
I'll tell you why it's unreasonable. I'll tell you why.
Okay, why?
Because you may have somebody like Jeremy Kyle, who will never ask a Christian, white Christian, to condemn what the Ku Klux Klan might have just done in Texas. It won't even arise. It won't even register on his radar to ask that question.
Sorry, I should reframe my question. You're answering the question...
So what he will do is, if there is a Muslim there, do you condemn this action? Now, if you have this disparity, then it's clear that you're targeting one people with a slanted innuendo, presumed guilty, as the book's title says, whereas the other is automatically presumed to not be part of that. Because that's why that question is not being asked.
You're preaching to the converted. That's not the question I was asking or trying to ask. You're converting me to the idea that Jeremy Kyle is a hypocrite and an annoyance. I agree, but I wasn't asking...
No, but I'm asking you, should that question have been asked?
I know, I should contextualise my question more specifically. Okay. My question more specifically is it reasonable for me personally to ask you personally, given the recent history, 9/11, Iran making a statement, an official statement. So it's now just me asking you, with good intent, because I'm actually partially curious to know, is it your understanding that that is within the prescription of Islam to behave?
But that's fine, I have no problem with that.
Okay, if you
my problem is...
So it's a one-to-one.
You see, I understand, but Tony, my problem is not with people asking me, I've heard a lot of this propaganda And I've seen the fact that we don't seem to call a white guy a terrorist, but only if he's brown and he's Muslim, then suddenly he's a terrorist. But if a white guy does it, it's for some other reasons. So if an MP gets shot up north, we're not going to call it terrorist. We're going to call it mental illness.
I want to join you hand in hand in attacking this hypocrisy.
We'll call it mental illness. Yeah, no, but hold on a second. Hold on a second, right? So what I'm trying to say to you is that in that context, okay, I think it's highly inappropriate for somebody not to ask me whether, I've heard all of these things. What does your religion say about these things?
It's a reasonable question.
That's very reasonable.
Thank you.
I have no problem with that. Okay. And in fact, I would hope.
Would it be?
In fact, I would hope that people would ask me that question more.
Good. So
you know why?
Excellent.
Because then hopefully that would be a genuine question.
It is.
Hopefully wanting to assess the reality of what Muslims and Islam actually says on the matter.
No, actually, I'm not. I'm only for the minute trying to assess the reality of what you.
But if somebody asks me, do you condemn what happened to Salman Rushdie? I would say, why are you asking me that question?
Well, we've managed to just contextualize it so you're not offended by me asking you personally the question in this way,
yes,
which is...
because, words matter, right?
Okay.
And how you say things matters a lot.
Okay, so I'm phrasing it as, in good faith...
Yeah, I have no problem with
because
that. I have no problem with that question.
Then I am asking you the question.
Yeah, that's fine.
Abbas, is it your understanding that... Is it your understanding that the attack on Salman Rushdie was prescribed within Islam as you embrace it, or was contrary to Islam?
So
that's just as you personally.
That's fine.
Nobody else.
So we would argue that the country that you live in, you have to abide by the laws of the country.
You're saying we. Hang on.
Muslims.
You said we. I'm not asking we. I'm
generally.
asking you
personally. I am we.
No, you were you.
As a unit, as
You're
a whole
you.
unit.
You're not all Muslim.
No, but I don't follow my religion according to me. I follow the consensus of opinion.
That is your personal choice, and at that level, at the primary level of choice, it is you.
Yeah,
and I'm just asking you.
Yeah, but I'm going by consensus. The consensus is that when you live in a country, you have to abide by the laws of that country.
Okay, hang on. I'll back off a minute.
Yeah.
Hold it. I'll back off, and I hear your point. So what you're saying is the position of Islam is contextualized by the politics of the nation state it's occurring in, and the prescription of Islam, your understanding, is therefore the attack was wrong because of that.
I'm saying that it was unlawful because under Islamic rule, there's so many caveats. First of all, even in a Muslim country, even if somebody commits a particular act that could warrant an execution, let's say for argument's sake, say somebody commits murder. Somebody commits murder. The result of that in Islam is that the murderer is executed.
Okay, this is great.
However...
Oh, no, that's not great.
However, you cannot be a victim. You can go around us, can't you?
Yeah, it's weird.
That's actually a violent act.
Nah,
I'm
not that offended. I can handle it.
That's
I'm
wrong.
robust
Well, wrong is a wrong.
It's all right. I can work with
wrong is a wrong.
So he was rude. It was on camera. So we won.
So the question here is, I've lost my train of thought.
It's all right.
Yeah. So I'm saying that. So for you to ask me that question is not a problem. Good. I would be happy to answer. So there are lots of caveats. So first of all, you can't be a vigilante.
I'm not.
In Islam, as a Muslim.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
So you can't just go and get a knife and say, I'm going to go and execute him because he murdered somebody.
Okay.
No. It has to go through a proper judicial process.
Can I interrupt for just 1 second?
Yeah.
I have a friend here who has followed for a long time. He keeps chipping in. Hang on, let me be clear.
He just likes chips too much.
You invited me in, therefore I haven't felt I could invite you. And if you would like to invite him in, that's your choice.
He's more than welcome to make a comment. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, at some point then.
So what I'm trying to say to you is that you're not allowed to be a vigilante.
Good.
What this guy did was a vigilante attack. He went out and did it of his own accord. It's not allowed in Islam.
Okay.
Secondly, he's not in a Muslim country. And the law of the land is that they're allowed to say these things.
Okay.
As a Muslim, if I don't like it, I speak out against it, or I leave the country.
Okay.
I can't enforce my religious values through violence and force on that particular people.
No vigilantes, and you have to go. You have to
law of the land.
You have to work in accordance with the law of the land.
Right.
Guys, could you
So in both of the,
back off just a little bit? Hi, guys.
so in both of these things,
That's two reasons.
two main initial reasons.
Thank you.
That it's completely unlawful for the action to have happened.
Excellent.
Under Islamic rule. But what we have to appreciate here,
Let's just pause and pick up this
but in a
up.
wider context.
Let me pick this up for the camera. Hang on. Abbas has made it clear. Yes, am I misrepresenting you?
No.
Abbas has made it hopefully clear that according to the prescriptions of Islam, as you understand them and advocate them, the action was wrong on
Yes.
at least two counts.
Absolutely.
No vigilantism.
That's right.
And you have to respect the law of the land
That's right.
within the country.
That's
That's
right.
very clear.
That's right.
Thank you so much for
Okay.
saying this much. This is good.
Now, the point that I'm trying to make to you here is this.
Yeah. We can go deeper. But
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
That when an action is done by an individual,
Uh-huh.
what we actually find when we delve a little bit below the surface, much of this, not all, because there are people who are rational in terms of they have their faculties, let's say. They're not rational in their actions,
Sure.
but they're not mentally, let's say, or they're not mentally impaired. They don't have psychological issues.
Yeah.
But what we do find is a very high case of many people. And I want to emphasize the point again, not everyone, but in a very high proportion of cases, that they have mental issues. The people who attacked the soldier, Rigsby?
What kind? The guy who was decapitated.
Decapitated. He had a long history of
Yeah, I believe it.
schizophrenia.
Yeah.
These guys have mental illness. And what I'm trying to say to you, Tony, is that what we have now, a narrative, through this freedom of speech, is reporting these issues as if these are like a sane individuals who are following their faith, and they're just following a very extreme version of it, and it is representative of Islam. Because this is some of
that's
the
abuse of freedom of speech.
this is some of the things that Douglas Murray will say, for example, that ISIS are the real representatives of Islam.
Well, actually,
It would be like
in fairness,
me.
if I ask a member of
Yeah.
ISIS, they will say
Right,
that.
but I could ask the Ku Klux Klan.
I agree.
And they'll say to me they're following
know.
the truth. You know,
I
they're
know.
burning a cross on the lawn
I know.
before they're lynching somebody. But I'm not going to say, okay, that means you're a good Christian.
I'm with you. Can we
Come
pause on Ku Klux Klan for 1 minute?
Yeah.
If my friend was ever going to say anything,
Yeah.
I didn't know. Shall I?
What's your name?
Jamie.
Jamie.
Yeah.
Abbas. Come closer,
Hello.
Jamie. We
Hello.
won't bite you.
I know.
Okay.
Bam's
Very
back in.
slim
We
young
were at
man.
Ku Klux Klan, and
It was
Jamie
just
has
a, it was
slim-
just a simple
slim
question.
young man.
It was just a simple question about
Yes.
what was Douglas Murray's comment?
Douglas Murray's implication and comments are
Yeah.
that ISIS are the true Islam.
Yeah. So do you
They're
believe
the true Muslims.
Do you believe the state should sort of have the power to sort of penalise him for them words?
No, I believe that. No, I'm not saying.
So
Look,
no, that's what my question
I'm
was.
not saying that everything everyone says
Yeah.
that they should be penalised for.
Let's say he did it
There's
every
a lot
day.
of there's
Let's-
a lot of rhetoric out there.
Lovely. Let's say he did it
But-
every day.
Yeah.
Would you then allow the
No,
state to
well,
penalise?
actually, I think what should happen is this, though.
Yeah, okay.
In a fair, balanced society,
Righto.
people should allow, as you said,
Yeah.
the voices that counter such claims, perhaps the equal or at least similar
Yes.
airtime.
Absolutely.
To allow
That's the
people
ideal.
to make
We
up
all
their own
we all
minds,
agree.
right? So,
Because
for
we don't
example,
agree on a lot of things,
so
but we
example,
all agree on
Mohammed
that.
Hijab
Right.
has openly challenged Douglas Murray to
Yeah.
a debate.
That's,
Yeah.
No, that's
A debate,
That's,
openly.
That's different.
Repeated. No, I'll give you an example. I'll tell you why. So Douglas Murray is supposedly on solid ground. He sees himself. He's intellectually grounded in what he's saying. Then he should have no problem debating one of our, alhamdulillah, intellectuals, Mohammed Hijab, on the topic that's prearranged with the moderator, and let's see who comes out on top
I'm not
with the
here
argument.
to defend Douglas
But he's
Murray
been running
or
with
not.
his tail between his legs.
So do you believe
He
that the
doesn't want to
state-
have the debate.
Do you
But
believe-
what Douglas wants to do,
You're not really.
No, no, I'm
you're just-
answering
you're
your
just
question.
talking-
No,
you're
no,
just
no.
talking platitudes.
No,
Sorry.
wait,
what
wait.
Douglas
The
wants
thing
to
is,
do,
the tone of the discourse that
Sorry.
we have
What-
is,
what-
I'm used to arguing the way you do. but
what
in this
Douglas
environment, a
Murray,
little bit
what
less.
Douglas Murray wants
Yeah.
to do is use a predominantly white right-wing press to air his xenophobia and his racism against Muslims and Islam.
I'm not.
And
with respect,
unfortunately-
you're moving to Douglas Murray,
And
we're not
unfortunately,
here
no,
to
I
defend
understand.
Douglas Murray.
But what I'm trying to explain to you is that it's only just and fair in a free society
Yeah.
that the opposite or the
Agreed.
opponents
But
are
you're-
allowed airtime.
But the example that you gave about Mohammed Hijab having a platform to talk about with Douglas Murray, this is all up to the dictates of each individual person who wants to talk to who. If you want to talk about like platforms accepting people on, I'm a big fan of trying to get people from different sides to debate. But we're talking about like free speech and like the state having some sort of control or something. Where are the powers that are going to balance this? Tony's talking about individuals having the freedom to talk and trying to like balance it out amongst themselves. Whereas I don't understand. Are you saying
Because
that there
I'm
needs to be an
saying to
external
you-
force that is balancing it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
so
no,
I'm
no,
asking
no,
you,
no.
what is that external
No, but what
force?
I'm
You're
saying-
not giving more power to the state.
No, no,
You're
no.
actually like minimising the tool
No,
of free
but my-
speech
what my-
to give it to the weaker
No, my
to
point,
attack up.
my point to you about Douglas Murray was
Yeah.
that he's been given a platform
Yes.
by people
Yes.
who are supposedly interested in freedom of speech,
Yes.
freedom of expression, and I would hope educating the people.
So.
But what they're doing is, you see, they're allowing his speech to dominate. And where there are
I think
others...
we would all agree. that
We all agree. You're preaching
That's
to the
fine.
converted.
That's fine.
We think you want equal representation,
Yeah, big time.
equality in the law, and if Douglas Murray is being given a disproportionate platform
Let's be
to
fair.
other representatives,
Let's be
totally,
fair.
totally.
Now,
When-
the other thing
But
is,
I
this,
think the main
you know your point,
charge-
but also, you know your point about it's a free choice of Douglas not to entertain the debate or whatever.
Yeah.
But you know what it is? If you have been trying to bulldoze
yeah,
Islam and Muslims for the last 10, 15 years,
yeah.
then I think what you should at least be able to do is be man enough and confident enough in your own abilities to have a moderated discussion.
But we agree.
And if you run, then you're clearly on shaky ground, or you know you're on shaky
We
ground.
agree, but what you're missing
That's
is,
fine.
in this free speech environment, when Douglas Murray fails to engage, we arrive here at Speaker's Corner where freedom of speech is guaranteed, so that we can publicly condemn and humiliate Douglas Murray.
Yeah.
You see how this works?
That's great.
You see how the thing...
Now we're on
Hang on,
nice-
hold it.
Oh, you're not going to shake my hand.
I'm not... No, sorry, I will... Well, I'm not quite as down on Douglas Murray as maybe
Oh,
you
that's
are,
fine.
okay? My initial feelings about Douglas Murray was I found him rather repellent. I'm actually finding most people more nuanced than I'd originally thought they were from all spectrums, okay? So even Douglas Murray may not be quite the demon that we think he is. It's complicated.
Well,
Nonetheless, he
You know
shouldn't...
what it is?
He shouldn't duck the debate.
You know what it is? When his nostrils start flaring,
Yes.
because you look at Douglas, literally his nostrils flare with rage.
Yes.
And he calls Brother Andalusia on that interview an Islamist and like equating him to be a terrorist and an extremist.
I saw that interview.
Somebody
and-
who has gone out of his way to talk against these things, to me that's deplorable. And to me that level of hatred, that venom, that obvious on his face, is shameful, quite frankly.
You
It's
know
shameful.
what? This is going to go... I'm saying this because I trust you and I like you, okay? I saw that debate.
It wasn't a debate.
Okay, I saw that interview.
Yeah.
My honest reaction,
Yeah.
I was with Douglas Murray.
Well, there you go.
And I was surprised to find
There you
myself
go.
in that
No,
position.
but there you go.
No, I wouldn't... I may open up a whole can of worms by
No.
saying that, but I'm sharing with you my honest response to that because I thought... I don't know who the Muslim guy who was on, but I thought, dude, you've got a chance here to say something which will defuse a lot of trouble. And he was ducking and diving.
No, he
was my
wasn't.
perception.
No, he wasn't. What he was doing was demonstrating exactly what that book that I quoted by Assistant Professor Todd Green, through his research, tells us that what we should be doing, and we know this anyway, which is that we should never be asked the question, and if it's asked, we should challenge the question. How dare you ask me if I condemn an act of violence, an act of oppression, or an act which is illegal? You should offer me the same respect that I offer you.
Can I test
that as a pretext, as a foundation, that you're a good guy and you probably do condemn it.
But nonetheless, in this discussion, you have decided that you
I wouldn't
have
answered it.
No, but you have. And
I would
what-
have said get lost.
But we've just done this. When I asked you this question, you have responded to it, and I think.
You didn't ask me that question.
Okay. When I asked you the question, I thought was a pertinent one, which is it representative
Which
of
is
Islam?
respectful.
Oh, fine. Okay. So the
Which
lack
is
of respect.
respectful.
Can I
Which
ask a
is
question,
which
please,
is
to test this
of course you
idea?
can. Which is
Thank you.
also based upon wanting information to clarify perhaps what you should be accepting or believing about Islam and Muslims.
And it's not just that.
The other one doesn't.
Again, it's not just that. It's more personal than that. Sorry, but I want to go to the difficult point. It's also to assess who you personally are. It's not just for me to learn about the faith.
Then I would be insulted by that. Because I would not assume that you would support Hitler because you're a German.
No. I was 99.999% sure that you were not that person.
No,
okay?
I would be.
But inevitably, when I ask that question, I'm learning both about the faith and about your allegiance, how you personally feel about it.
No, because if you had a suspicion,
I don't.
I'm just saying, if I felt that you had a suspicion about my integrity, about my honor, about my respectability, then yes, that would upset me.
I understand.
But similarly, I would hope that you have your own self-respect, and that you're a nice guy and you go out of your way to be a nice, cordial guy. That if somebody misrepresents you or perhaps doubts your sincerity, you perhaps would be upset by that or concerned by that.
I would be upset, but I think the difference is I would be upset, but nonetheless, I would prefer they shared it with me, and I would hopefully be confident enough that I could counter it and bring them round to my way of looking at it, or bring them closer.
That's great on an individual That's great on an individual process. The problem is
life is lived at an individual
level.
The
problem is that these questions are asked publicly, and they have a public reaction. They have a public perception. And that's the problem. But go on, please, ask your question.
Well, I was trying to think about something now. So surely we should always grasp the opportunity to sort of like project ourselves into the public sphere so that we can sort of affect that public perception of us. So I was going to give the example of, let's say I come here one Sunday and I say, I'm a climate activist and I'm a vegan. I believe these causes so passionately. I really do believe they are the greatest threats or whatever. Then in the news in the week, you see that acts are committed by vegans and climate activists, which are like derailing trains or sneaking onto farms or something. The next week you come here and you ask me, Jamie, do you believe in them things that they vegan activists
That's not what we're asked. Do you condemn the bombing of that
they come up to me. They go, you were talking about that. Are you on that side or do you condemn them type of acts? I think if I were to go, oh, how dare you say that to me? I thought I was a nice guy. I think that's being way too bow down. I can stand up and say, yes, I believe in the cause, I believe we should never do them types of acts.
First of all, you're not a minority. You're the majority.
Well, I am. In the version of
you're
veganism.
a white Englishman. But the point I'm trying to make to you here is this. You have a minority. You see, look, everything's within a context.
Sure.
It's not in isolation. If you ask me to condemn an act of terrorism, it's not an isolated question. It's based upon an entire fabric that's been created.
But by me phrasing the question specifically enough, then you're willing to address it.
But that's very different, Tony, because your question was respectful. Your question was to ask me to educate you about what Islam or what Muslims believe.
Okay, so hang on, wait.
It's very but hold on, Tony.
Okay.
But within the context of the environment that has been created about Muslims, when you then ask that question, do you condemn it? It has a very different scope of meaning.
I get it. So look, can I carry this out to a wider issue then? Therefore, surely what we're learning from this conversation, because hopefully it's constructive, that Douglas Murray and the like need to understand is that in principle they want to ask a question. The problem is not that the question in itself, it's the context and motive. And if they can reframe...
And the implication.
And the implication. But so if the Douglas Murrays of this world can reframe the question in a different, more specific context respectfully, you personally will be more than happy to address it.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Hopefully other Muslims might be as well, but you would, and this is good.
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, so then Douglas Murray and co, watch out. You're not being respectful enough. You're not framing the question specifically. If they can concede that, can you concede and understand that it's not an unreasonable question necessarily? It's not in and of itself an unreasonable question to ask. It's phrased correctly.
It's not unreasonable to ask that, we hear these people claiming that they're doing this for Islam. Because they're following Islam. What does your religion actually say about these things? That is perfectly fine. I wish people would ask that question all the time.
Okay.
But what I completely am opposed to is a question that's asked within an environment and a context that has many implications, one of which are guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah, no, you always want an environment of innocence or proven guilty.
And you don't want that.
Don't even have those
Anyway,
conversations.
Tony, I think it's been a lovely discussion.
Oh, can I say one thing?
Go on, please.
Okay. We're agreeing.
Yes.
Let's only have you, before you even have those kind of discussions, you've got to have established a playing field where the assumption is innocent or proven guilty.
Yes.
Until you've established that playing field, don't have any discussions, okay?
I mean, think good of people.
Yeah.
You know, have a good. Don't assume just because the media have told you that this is like the enemy within, or that secretly the majority of us follow or agree with ISIS.
But just as you're scared,
do
you understand how I say we very loosely, how we're scared as well. Yeah, when the towers went down, that was the big thing.
Of course.
That made a huge impact. We also, and I don't mean we, because I'm an individual.
Let's not get into Tower 7.
Yeah, let's not get. But no, let's.
He's probably read a bit about
that. Let's not get anywhere near.
Let's not go to when Rumsfeld said I think $2.1 trillion are unaccounted for. And guess what? All those computers are in Tower 7, and coincidentally, no plane crashed in Tower 7.
I wouldn't dream of. I hate conspiracy theories. They're fun in movies. They're rubbish in real life.
You know what it is, Tony? I hate them too. Yeah. I don't delve with them. I just think it's rather interesting. That's all. That's what I'm saying. That $2.1 or $2.3 trillion has disappeared, and the accounts and the computers were in Building 7, which was not hit. But just happened to just
you are into this.
I'm just saying it's rather interesting.
Okay, this is another debate to have.
Anyway, let's not get into that.
To try and wind this one up, now damn, I've forgotten where the point was.
No, you were saying that.
I was saying,
after
I
9/11.
can understand why your community, I don't like putting it into groups because I don't think tribal, I think in terms of individuals.
Yeah.
But for a minute, if we were representatives of communities, how your community may feel nervous, put upon and misrepresented, I can get that feeling. It's reasonable that I should get that. I'm asking, can you understand how the community I'm part of might also feel a little bit on edge and a little bit nervous, given some recent history, which was exacerbated by the attack on Rushdie? I don't think their feelings about that are unreasonable.
Tony, you know what it is? There have been dozens, if not hundreds, of 9/11s on the Muslim community from the Western world.
This is a very interesting point.
Right? You go to the Muslim world, they've been ravaged by wars and weaponry that have been supplied to both sides and perpetuating these wars and the fighting and the division that have been created. So we've had more 9/11s committed upon our societies than the 9/11 that happened in America. We Muslims were just as vocal and disgusted by what had happened there. But what we see is an absolute destruction of the Muslim lands and the Muslim people by the West generally, funded by them, whether covertly or overtly, whatever, right? Overtly, they've done this. So we've had many 9/11s, but I don't, in that context, look at white people and assume the worst of you. Because I know that was your governments, that were our governments, that were maybe some elite people at top who, the weapons makers, the manufacturers, they lobbied for these wars. I know the media, for example, who often didn't report on these things fairly and actually went with the military guidelines in terms of what to report. But I don't look at a white person and hold you in any shape or form responsible for the hundreds of 9/11s that happened in the Muslim world.
Sorry, let me come in on this one.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, listen, I think what you just said was really beautifully said. I hear your point. Okay, I think the Arabs have definitely had the thin edge of the wedge. I think in the West we get hit once badly by something and it shakes us to our core in a way that you guys have probably, if we were talking communities, you guys have been living in, day out, and we must look, slightly soft and oversensitive. I can hear that, and I take your point. If there's a way we can take all of the truths and facts which have been mentioned and gel them into a coherent story, that's a good way
Tony,
forward.
just one other thing, 3,500 people died in the Twin Towers.
Yeah.
Completely horrid for their families, for their children, for their wives and husbands, parents, whatever, whoever lost, firefighters, whatever. It's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
but 1 million civilians died after that when the Americans and the British, predominantly the two, they say allied, but we were the bulk of the forces. The Americans were the bulk of the forces. 1 million civilians died in Iraq.
Yeah, I hear you.
1 million.
Yeah.
You look at the French and what they did in Algeria. 3 million people killed.
Can I ask a question?
Millions of people. And you know what it is, Tony? As a Muslim, I would have a lot of, let's say, sympathy for somebody who also condemned those actions. At least was aware of them.
I do.
But the point, I know you're a thinker, but there are people today who are, no doubt, and I don't blame them, because it is a deplorable thing to cry and to be upset about the 9/11.
Yeah.
But where is their level of
proportionality?
Where is their sympathy for the million civilians that died in Iraq?
Yeah.
Where are their sympathy for the tens of thousands of civilians that died in Afghanistan?
Well, hang on, I'd add to
or
that.
in Libya?
I'll add to that the
Or
oppression.
the ones that are being persecuted in Palestine.
I hear you, but
where's the tears?
Also, the oppression that occurred before 9/11 that led up to it. The history of Western interference in the Middle East and exploitation is pretty despicable. We have the luxury of not having to live with its consequences. We get 9/11 and we'd become acclimatized to a rarefied level of safety. Everything that you're saying is correct. But I think this is why freedom of speech is so important, is so we can share these truths.
But you know, Tony, this is what I'm trying to explain to you. On an individual level, that's fine. In a society that's balanced, that allows freedom of speech to be aired from multiple views, and and giving some sort of equality, it's also a good thing.
Yeah.
Well, of course, we have some limits, though, right? But when you have a disproportionality of one having a voice and the other one is literally muted, right?
Then that's not good.
Then that's not good.
Clearly, we're against
and
that.
so what we have today is we have freedom of speech. The people who are crying for freedom of speech are often the ones who have the platform and are doing the ridiculing. And the ones who are the victims don't have a voice, often, because they don't have that direct proportionality of rebuttal. And so what you end up with is, as Rabbi Herschel said, the words making the worlds, and the world that we're making today. Look, throughout the world, we have problems in Europe, in America, in much of the world, where people are moving to ultra-nationalistic and often xenophobic and racist ideologies are succeeding.
Sure.
And this is primarily because you're having this unfettered. So social media and these things are incredibly powerful. And I would say that we are regressing from our qualities that it was to be a good human being, to offer equality in the sight of the law, in the sight of one another. We're regressing.
I think that's happening, but I honestly think the antidote to that is not to try and constrain it, but to have more conversations like this in the open, where we see the common ground.
Let's hope this goes viral.
What?
Let's hope it goes viral, Tony.
You know, more of these conversations, I think, is a better antidote to that problem than simply trying to put them behind brick walls and say, don't talk about it. That's my belief. Maybe I'm wrong and maybe you're right. But
well, I think we've had a nice discussion.
As usual.
I think some good points have come out. Some things that I didn't even anticipate we would talk about, but we've moved on.
You always choke me up a bit.
Thank you for your input as well.
No,
you always hit me here.
Well, that's the best way, Tony.
Yeah.
That's
really
the best
nice.
way. That's the best way.
Thank you.
Because you know what it is, Tony? We are emotional beings. Right? And sometimes when we look at or feel the emotion of the other, it gives us a reflection of perhaps maybe the subject has a little bit more deeper nuances than I've read. And of course, it's vice versa, right? So it's,
sweet.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Cheers. See you later.